And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, could I for real reuse my cat litter to put out wildfire embers? And if I win my state's COVID vaccination lottery, could I finally afford my kids' out-of-state university fees and also buy a Lambo? And now, the podcast host who always takes his thigh friction-induced leg chafing in stride, Pete Dominic.
What an elaborate introduction. Thank you very much, sir. Buy a Lambo. That took me a second. Buy a Lamborghini and get my kid. Yeah, that is the plan, by the way. That is our college plan, is the girls have been entered into the state university tuition lottery. So fingers crossed, because I don't know. I don't know if this podcast is going to be able to put the girls through college or not, but I really thank you for supporting it. Hope to see you tonight. By the way, it is Thursday, if you're listening on Thursday, the 1st of July, and on Thursday nights, we hang out at 8 p.m. East on Zoom, virtually. Always a riot, something great to celebrate today, because it's also John Carroll Day, and that our great friend, Grammy Award winner, singer-songwriter of this year, introduction, everyday song, Stand Up, a rally song, an anthem of sorts, releases, drops. It is available for all of you to get right now to stream. All of the links are in the show notes, but give that as much attention as you can. And John, on the show today, I featured him as a featured guest here on the program. He's been a longtime listener, supporter, subscriber, and contributor to this show and our community. And so last night, I gave him a call. I thought about it last minute. I was like, John's song, Stand Up, drops tomorrow, available for everybody. I really should do everything I can to promote it. You know what? He's such a great, smart, thought-provoking guy and a perfect guy to talk to on an insane news day to distract and to learn more about him. We had an awesome conversation. I'm so excited to share that with you. John and I have talked privately several times, and he's often at our hangout. It's just such a great guy. So John joins me coming up. Also very excited to have author, writer, yoga teacher, feminist, and journalist Jill Filipovic on the show for the first time as well. She's got a great essay in the New York Times this week. She's written 2 excellent books. So smart, so great to have her. She writes The Week in Women as part of her newsletter every week, and she's just awesome. I had an awesome conversation with her. John Carroll, Jill Filipovic joining me both on the program today, but so much news, like I mentioned. Huge news day yesterday, and I want to get that, everything that happened yesterday and more. It's time for the last 24. All right, well, yesterday we were all shocked to learn that Bill Cosby was released from prison. Then later on in the day, we learned that former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had died at the age of 88. And then later in the day, we learned from the Washington Post, I think first, the New York grand jury is said to return criminal indictments against Trump's company and its CFO, Alan Weisselberg, the first from prosecutors probing the former president's business dealings, and so much more. But let's start there, and we'll go to David Fahrenthold, who was on several shows on MSNBC and probably elsewhere as well. He is one of 4 reporters in the Washington Post to first report this. A grand jury in Manhattan filed criminal indictments Wednesday against former President Donald Trump's company and its longtime chief financial officer. Here is David Fahrenthold talking about it, adding more to the story.
Well, tomorrow, as you said, we will learn more about the evidence that the Manhattan DA has against Alan Weisselberg and the Trump Organization. We anticipate that the charges filed tomorrow, well, 2 things about them. We anticipate that they will relate to taxes that should have been paid on payments, benefits to Trump Organization executives. This will not just be 1 or 2, missed tax payments. This may be sort of alleged as a conspiracy or something that happened over a long period of time. We also don't believe this to be the end of the case. I think this will be the first charges in this case, but I don't think that we're seeing the end. In fact, we may be sort of seeing the beginning as prosecutors put their pressure on Weisselberg in the hopes that he will flip and become one of their witnesses.
All right, in the days and weeks to come, obviously, everybody's going to be following that story. And other than that, it's a whole bunch of speculation. And I just don't love that. I mean, I suppose I traffic in it sometimes with certain guests to learn a little bit more, but I don't love it. We'll find out what happens when we do, and it's important to try to understand these legal issues. But I want to move on right now to some of the other big stories of the day. Of course, shocking news. The world reacting after Bill Cosby's sexual assault conviction was overturned. His conviction overturned on Wednesday. And, you know, I don't know much what to say about this. I sat there and tried to write a tweet for a while. I was like, nobody needs to hear from me on this. All of Twitter reacted to it in a number of ways. And the same goes for Donald Rumsfeld dying, which I frankly have more to say about because I so closely followed and covered the war in Iraq. But back to Cosby, I thought it might be just best to play some audio of some of his actual victims who called in to ABC News yesterday. And I just thought it might be probably just best to hear from them. So here first is one of the 60 accusers, Victoria Valentino, talking about and reacting to Bill Cosby's release from prison.
I'm just absolutely in shock. I had no idea. I hadn't been watching television this morning. I'm on the West Coast. I'm just getting up and getting moving for the day, and suddenly I'm getting all these phone calls, so I haven't really had time to process it, except for the fact that my stomach is lurching, and I am deeply distressed about the injustice of the whole thing. You know, he's a sociopath. He's a serial rapist. And the fact that he had a relationship with Bruce Castor, I believe Bruce Castor's father or brother-in-law or someone was the realtor who helped Bill Cosby find and purchase his Cheltenham mansion. So they had a personal relationship, and I don't know that that has really been brought to the fore.
Yeah, and that guy is also, Castor was also one of Trump's lawyers defending him in the impeachment trial, the second one, who was just made a mockery of. What a villain. And now here is another Cosby accuser, Janice Baker Kinney, also on ABC News.
Well, I'm being bombarded by text messages and phone calls from friends and media outlets, and it's taken me a little bit of time to absorb all this so quickly. So at this very moment, all I can say is I'm stunned, I'm shocked, and my stomach's kind of in a knot over this. Just one little legal ease can overturn this when so many people came forward. So many women have told their truths, and this serial rapist gets to go home today is just stunning to me.
Really important to hear from both of those women. That was Janice Baker Kinney. And now let's hear from Elie Mystal, who is on MSNBC, laying it all out for us. This is like a 2-minute clip. It's fire as always. Here he is, Nation Magazine justice correspondent, legal expert on MSNBC.
Yeah, first of all, I think we have to stop saying the phrase "no one is above the law," because that's clearly not true. It's clear that some people are above the law. If they are men, if they are rich and they are powerful and their victims are women, then guess what? You're above the law. And you're going to continue to be above the law until we change the laws and change who is enforcing and interpreting the laws. That's the whole ballgame. So when I look at that New Yorker cover and I look at Andrea Constand and I think about how she's the one victim, she's the one victim who was allowed to bring her claim because for reasons passing understanding, we still have not changed the statute of limitations on rape allegations to unlimited, right? We do it for murder, so I don't want to hear, oh, memories fade. We do it for murder. If you kill somebody, you can't get off because you killed somebody a long time ago. Why don't we do the same thing for rape? Because this country hates women. That's really the only conclusion that you kind of end up at, right? So number one, people will continue to be above the law as long as we don't change the laws. Number two, in this particular case, what we have here more than anything is a state Supreme Court being completely extreme in their remedy to a potential problem. Now, I am a defense guy. I generally roll with people who are, who are fighting prosecutors, not on the prosecutorial side. So I understand the legal utility of keeping prosecutors to their word. See, I don't know about unwritten word, but let's just say, for the sake of the argument, keeping prosecutors to their word is an important, legal goal. But the remedy in this case is not to throw out the conviction and have him never tried again. That is crazy and extreme. The remedy here is to say, like, okay, the statements that Cosby allegedly relied on this deal before he made, those statements are inadmissible. And now we try him again. And we try him again and again and again until we get it. Like that's the way to do it. And again, that's what we would do if he was setting 60 fires. That's what we would do if he murdered 60 people. But because he allegedly sexually assaulted 60 women, we're like, double jeopardy. What can you do? That is the core of the state Supreme Court's issue here. They went too far to remedy a potential wrong, and that's with me being way generous.
All right, there you go. And that is the Bill Cosby chunk reaction to him being released. I'm sure there'll be a lot more of that. And that's all I got to say about it right here on today's episode of Stand Up. Moving on to another really important story from yesterday that probably would have been the top story if not for so many other giant stories. But the headline in the New York Times: in video, Exxon lobbyist describes efforts to undercut climate action. So a veteran oil lobbyist, industry lobbyist, was told he was meeting with a recruiter, but it was a setup. The video call, which was secretly recorded, was part of an elaborate sting operation by an individual working for the environmental group Greenpeace UK. And on Wednesday, yesterday, excerpts from the conversation were aired by British broadcaster Channel 4. The affiliate of Greenpeace that recorded the video, Unearthed, also released excerpts. I grabbed a couple of minutes for you. And in this first segment, you hear the oil lobbyists talk about what senators they have relationships with, and it's just unbelievable, or totally believable.
Revealed that behind the scenes, the company has been working hard to undermine President Biden's attention from its polluting activities. But not one of its serving senior executives has ever come clean about the Exxon playbook. Until now. Here's what Dan Easley and Keith McCoy told us. Mr. McCoy revealed that behind the scenes, the company has been working hard to undermine President Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure plan. The White House proposal included spending hundreds of billions on clean energy and transport as part of the most ambitious clean energy legislation ever proposed by a U.S. president. And it would have been paid for by higher taxes on corporations like Exxon. But these ambitious proposals are on the verge of being defeated. According to Mr. McCoy, Exxon has been working to scale back the legislation and stop Exxon paying more tax. He told us which United States senators the company sought to recruit to their lobbying campaign. And they're not all Republicans.
We're playing defense because President Biden's talking about this big infrastructure package, and he's going to pay for it by increasing corporate taxes. You stick to highways and bridges, then a lot of the negative stuff starts to come out because
for you guys, because
there's a germaneness, right? That doesn't make any sense for a highway bill. Why would you put in a something on emissions reductions on climate change to oil refineries in a highway bill?
Who's the crucial guys for you?
Well, Senator Capito, who's the ranking member on Environment and Public Works, Joe Manchin, I talk to his office every week, and he is the kingmaker on this because he's a Democrat from West Virginia, which is a very conservative state, and he's not shy about sort of staking his claim early and completely changing the debate. So on the Democrat side, we look for the moderates on these issues. So it's the Manchins, it's the Cinemas, it's the Testers.
Exxon is even trying to get through to President Biden through his friend, Senator Chris Coons.
Other ones that aren't talked about is Senator Coons, who's from Delaware, who has a very close relationship with Senator Biden. So we've been working with his office. Matter of fact, our CEO is talking to him next Tuesday. Then you take it out a little bit more and you say, okay, well, who's up for re-election in 2022? That's Hassan, that's Kelly. And then obviously the Republicans. We have a great relationship with the senators where we have assets. I can't worry about the 2027 class because they're not focused on re-election. The 2022 class is focused on re-election. So I know I have them. Those are the Marco Rubios. Those are the Senator Kennedys. Those are the Senator Daines. So you can have those conversations with them because they're a captive audience. They know they need you and I need them.
I mean, this is such a important, huge investigation and discovery and scandal for Exxon, who vehemently denies misleading the public on climate change. However, this undercover investigation reveals for the first time a serving Exxon executive admitting the company aggressively fought climate change through shadow groups to protect its investments. Also, they were asked about what they got done, what they achieved for their industry, for their company with Donald Trump as president. Listen to this guy's voice and how he laughs just at the question and then lists off all the accomplishments. It's, of course, as we thought, but it's all on tape, admitted now. Listen.
When he detailed the successive lobbying victories the company secured under Trump. This includes issuing thousands of new oil and gas drilling permits, which critics argue are incompatible with efforts to tackle climate change.
The executive branch and regulatory team for Exxon had extraordinary success over the last 4 years, in large part because the administration was so predisposed to helping.
What were the big wins you got out of Trump?
You should Google ExxonMobil announcement and Donald Trump. So he live Facebooked from the West Wing, our big Growing the Gulf project. He mentioned us in 2 states of the union.
Yeah.
We were able to get investor-state dispute settlement protections in NAFTA. We were able to rationalize the permitting environment and, get tons of permits out. The wins are such that it would be difficult to categorize them all. I mean, tax has to be the biggest one, right? The reduction of the corporate rate and was it's probably worth billions to Exxon. There were a lot of wins.
Mr. McCoy then told us how Exxon aggressively fought to discredit climate science. He also told us how, even now, talking down solutions to global warming, like renewable energy and electric vehicles, is critically important to the work Exxon does in Washington, D.C.
Did we aggressively fight against some of the science? Yes. Did we hide our science? Absolutely not. Did we join some of these shadow groups to work against some of the early efforts? Yes, that's true. But there's nothing illegal about that. We were looking out for our investments. We were looking out for our shareholders. And you're not going to be able to just switch to battery-operated vehicles or wind for your electricity. And just having that conversation around why that's not possible in the next 10 years is critically important to the work that we do. So, and that's at every phase. That's in the Senate, that's in the House, that's with the administration. Something like climate change, there's some forest fires, there's an increase of, 0.001, Celsius. That doesn't affect people's everyday lives.
Oh, man, really, really important work, activism, journalism, whatever you want to call it. But follow @UE on Twitter. That is Unearthed, and they're part of Greenpeace UK. And also drag all of those executives that are currently serving in that company, drag them up to Capitol Hill and make them testify under oath and let AOC and Katie Porter and Elizabeth Warren and any other smart, unintimidated congressperson pick them apart and a fart in front of everybody. in front of the world. I don't care that I said a fart. I'm not editing that shit out of here. All right, and a couple more clips for you here. Dr. Anthony Fauci on CNN basically saying he's concerned the widening gap between the vaccinated and unvaccinated in America is going to get worse, leading to possible spikes. The Delta variant is now found in all 50 states of the U.S. Here is Dr. Fauci.
If you are not vaccinated, you are at considerable risk. When you have such a low level of vaccination superimposed upon a variant that has a high degree of efficiency of spread, what you are going to see among under-vaccinated regions, be they states, cities, or counties, you're going to see these individual types of blips. It's almost like it's going to be two Americas.
Two Americas. Okie doke. Well, moving on from COVID, I wanted to play for you. Here is Jim Acosta, CNN. He was with former president, disgraced loser, and reality show host who's now going to be indicted, hopefully. Well, at least his company is. Getting booed after asking Trump, will he apologize for January 6th? The ball's on Acosta.
Mr. Trump, will you apologize about January 6th?
All right, and that is all the audio I have for you. But here in the end, I do want to just make a comment or two about Donald Rumsfeld, who we lost yesterday. Did we lose him, really? Or did he lose us? A war in Iraq. A lot of people are pointing to Teen Vogue for the best tweeted headline about his death, because most of them talked more nuance about his long career in public service, from a state representative, or rather from a congressional representative to a defense secretary, twice, two different administrations that he had that job. And Teen Vogue just tweeted, accused war criminal and torture defender dead at 88. So that's one response. I also saw this from Spencer Ackerman at the Daily Beast, who writes, an actuarial table of the deaths for which Donald Rumsfeld is responsible is difficult to assemble. In part, that's a consequence of his policy as defense secretary from 2001 to 2006 not to compile or release body counts, a PR strategy learned after disclosing the tolls eroded support for the Vietnam War. As a final obliteration, we cannot know, let alone name, all of the dead. And from that Teen Vogue article, as defense secretary during the beginning of the War on Terror, Rumsfeld's legacy also includes the U.S. torture programs that have characterized this era. What Rumsfeld himself actually did and what he was responsible for as the head of DOD have been litigated time and again. In a 2002 HuffPost reported, he personally signed a 2002 memorandum authorizing interrogation techniques, asking in a handwritten note why forcing detainees to stand was limited to only 4 hours a day. The ACLU represented 9 men who sued Rumsfeld and others for torture in 2005. Rumsfeld even faced a war crime suit in Germany, as stated in a 2006 report. 2008 report from the Senate Armed Forces Committee placed much of the blame for the U.S. use of torture tactics on Donald Rumsfeld and other senior officials, as Reuters reported at the time. Well, at least Donald Rumsfeld was named sexiest cabinet member by People magazine in 2002. Great job, people. Fantastic. You should be proud of that. On Twitter, of course, the reactions came fast and hot. Comedian Liz Winstead, expect no respect in death if you showed none in life. In The Atlantic, George Packer writes, Rumsfeld was the worst Secretary of Defense in American history. Being newly dead shouldn't spare him of this distinction. Mark Harris writes, information that Donald Rumsfeld is dead seems to be accurate and unlikely to change, which is such a violation of everything he stood for. Now, that is a clever tweet. You got to read it a few times. And J. Alcovan with his usual edge, Donald Rumsfeld is dead just in time for Cosby to bang him. Oh, dear Lord. Did I mention I'll be opening for J. Alcovan July 26th in Boston? All right, that is just some hot takes and quick reaction on Donald Rumsfeld, who I personally covered and hated. I mean, when I say covered, I mean I talked about him every day and interviewed reporters who were interviewing him and talked to authors who had written about his role in the invasions in Afghanistan and Iraq, torture, and so much more. All right, that's all I've got for you in the first part, the last 24, but now it's time for rapid-fire headlines and what we like to call the news dump.
The silly voice is going away, this farmer character sucks. We're sorry we subjected you to it for today's news dump.
Wow, he just killed one of his own characters right here in front of all of us? Pico, you're a legend. All right, where do we start today? Let's start with a pop culture story that a lot of folks have been paying close attention to because it has a lot of details that matter because it's representative of a larger problem. But a judge denied Britney Spears' request to remove her father as her conservator. I don't know anything about that story, but that is the headline, and it came out late last night. TikTok announced they would be removing more than 7 million accounts of suspected underage users. Yale University Drama School announced it'll stop charging tuition for its students starting in August after receiving a $150 million donation. Oh, well, my daughters might want to go to Yale Drama. That's the best acting school in the country, arguably. And now it's free. But looks like they only let like 5 new students in a year. So good luck, everybody, with your free acting school. Actress Allison Mack Wednesday was sentenced to 3 years in prison for her role in a sex cult. That is a story I never really followed and still don't want to. President Biden announced a raise for federal firefighters to $15 an hour. That's not nearly enough for what seems to be the hardest job in the world, dressing up in a fireproof suit and then trying to extinguish hot flames that you're surrounded by, and that you could, and often, unfortunately, maybe not often, but too many guys do die or have serious health consequences as a result of it. A couple firefighters listening to this show, hey guys, $15 an hour, not enough, right? The New York City mayoral vote is a complete mess after the Board of Elections finds a discrepancy and error. It doesn't seem to be any laws broken, just to be an unorganized mess. I don't know much about it, but I did want to mention that. Arkansas had its biggest one-day coronavirus spike in 4 months, and that's terrible news. And speaking of terrible news, still no survivors as search crews continue to comb through the ruins in a Florida condo tower, pulling 6 more bodies, at least, from the rubble on Wednesday, bringing the number of confirmed dead to 18, the highest one-day toll since the building collapsed almost a week ago. Number of residents still unaccounted for stands at 147 by the count I'm seeing at the Associated Press. In Williamsburg, Virginia, fire crews helped more than 24 people get safety after a roller coaster at a Virginia amusement park, Busch Gardens. My family and I have been to that park and been on this roller coaster. Oh my God. The Griffin roller coaster stranded 28 people Tuesday evening, and the evacuation apparently went smoothly and no one was injured. In a statement, Busch Gardens officials apologized and said safety is their top priority. Oh, well, that's good. The amusement park describes the Griffin on its website as a floorless dive coaster with a 205-foot drop. Wow, that is everybody, roller coaster fans' worst nightmare. Wow, we've been on that roller coaster, my whole family. Scary stuff. All right, that is all I've got for you here on the News Dump. I am running super late, and so I want to wrap it up here. Sorry, I don't have any uplifting stories to end on, but I do have great guests joining me today. Coming up, the great John Carroll, Stand Up. The song drops today, so please go get that. Tonight, we'll hang out. Hopefully, John will be able to make it, and we'll be able to thank him and congratulate him there. But right now, I want to introduce you to Jill Filipovic, who is a writer and an author and one of my favorite people to follow and read. She's a lawyer as well, and her Substack is jill.substack.com. I highly recommend you subscribe to that one. Her new book is Okay, Boomer, Let's Talk. How My Generation Got Left Behind. It's on sale now, and I just absolutely love talking to Jill. We had a great conversation about a wide range of issues. She's been writing about at CNN.com, at the New York Times, of course, her Substack newsletter. Follow her on Twitter, Jill Filipovic. I know I'm saying her name wrong, but I'm sticking to it. She finally gives me the correct pronunciation. Coming up, a great conversation. Please let her know you heard her here. Here we go. Okay, I finally got her. I can't believe this is the first time she's been on this podcast, but it's not because I haven't been trying. I think she's one of my favorite voices, one of the most important voices in the important conversations that we need to be having every day. I highly recommend, as I said before I hit record, that you subscribe to her Substack, that you get her books, that you follow her on Twitter. Very happy to have Jill joining me now. Hi, Jill.
Hi, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm very excited to have you. I thought I knew everything because I read your newsletter on Substack and your books. I haven't read them entirely, I should confess, but I want to. But now I didn't realize that not only do you have a pretty great yoga practice, but you are also teaching yoga in Tuscany in September. And I'll say on behalf of my wife, she wants in because she's a yoga teacher and is fluent in Italian and is an Italian citizen. That's pretty cool, dude. How important is yoga to you that you're actually teaching it in Italy?
Yeah, it's an important part of my life. I practice every day. I've been teaching via Zoom during the pandemic, which has been a bit of a lifesaver. And I do these really fun, they're yoga and writing retreats. And I co-teach with a variety of folks. The one in Italy is with my own longtime yoga teacher, Emily Shapiro. We do one in Italy. We do one in Costa Rica. We're doing one in California this year. Then I'm doing another one with a good friend who's a photographer in Kenya next year. So lots of really cool writing, storytelling, plus yoga retreats all over the world. That is really exciting. And you just said Kenya. You lived and worked there and even met your husband there, maybe? Yeah, well, my husband and I met in Malawi and then moved to Kenya together. But yes, we lived there for several years. So the retreat is kind of bringing everyone to some of my favorite places in the country. Why did you live in Kenya? My husband was an editor at Foreign Policy magazine. He was their Africa editor. So his job brought him there. And then I was doing a fun, interesting place to live. And I'm freelance, so I can live anywhere in the world. And why not Kenya? You just cut out for the first time, and I'm just going to leave it in there and keep trying to go. And then if not, I'll just call you. It's totally fine. Sounds good. Awesome at editing anyway, but I kind of missed the answer, which was like, no, it was like, I want to keep it in there just to make fun of it. Oh, tell me about Kenya and why you live there. Oh, no, I really genuinely wanted to know. Should we try again one more time? Like, what did you learn in Kenya? Like, what was the experience that you had? It was awesome. Nairobi is a super dynamic, super diverse, radically, quickly changing city. So it was a really interesting time to be there. I mean, there's amazing art and culture and music, and it's just a great jumping off point for a totally fascinating region. So it was a great place to work from. It was a great place to report from, and I miss it. I'm excited to go back in March for this retreat. That's very cool. Is there a place for people to find out like where these yoga retreats are if they want to sign up? I mean, can anybody sign up and go? Yeah, definitely. If you go to my Twitter feed, it's my pinned tweet. It has a link to my yoga website. Great. And that's Jill Filipovic. Am I saying your name right? People say it's close enough. Nobody can say it right, including probably me. I know, but I've heard people say it different ways. And so what is the correct pronunciation of your name? Jill, right? I say Jill is the easy one. Filipovic. Oh, God. Oh, wow. Everybody gets it wrong. Everybody gets it wrong in every different way, but it's all right. Okay. Well, I love that you're low maintenance on it. I'm not, people are doing their best. It's okay. A lot of people have very interesting and important newsletters on Substack. I highly recommend people to yours for a lot of reasons. But if I were to say one reason, I think one of the things that I really like the most is it seems like every week you do the Week in Women. And I think that's fascinating. And can you just tell us a little bit about that specific one and anything else you want to talk about your newsletter? Yeah, so I do that one typically on Mondays or Tuesdays early in the week, and it's a roundup of news about women's rights around the world. So, if you want kind of one quick read, one sentence summaries of all the big stories about women with links you can click through to read more on each of them, I compile that. And so it's a nice way to have a sense of, in what ways is our world changing when it comes to women's rights?
Yeah, I mean, that alone is worth subscribing and paying for your newsletter, The Week in Women. I mean, there's I don't know, how often do you publish? Because I get them in my email box I can never keep track of how often, but that alone is worth subscribing. You could name it that, and I would still subscribe, but there's a lot more in there, including, expansions on, for example, your New York Times piece from this week. You also have a great CNN piece that I want to talk with you about. But let me just ask you about one of those, because you've written about this a lot, and it's one I'm super conflicted about. And my favorite thing about you is how granular you get, how much nuance there is in your books and certainly in your pieces, because it's so easy to minimize and water all these big issues down. And one of them is Afghanistan. And I've been following this situation, this story for almost 15 years and what's happened there. And I think the hardest part is even before 9/11, I remember it was like Jay Leno's wife, Maeve Leno, was like working to fight for women's rights against the Taliban before anybody knew in America about Afghanistan or the Taliban. Anyway, there's a lot to say about what the future of Afghanistan is, and specifically for its women. I don't know how you want to answer such a big question that you've written so extensively about here in our conversation, but I'd really like to talk with you about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the frustrations that I have with a lot of the discourse on Afghanistan is that people want there to be a good answer. And at this point, I'm not sure there is.
Right.
The reality is that war was very much kind of washed in the language of feminism, right? Which every feminist I know at the time found pretty disturbing. But very much the lead up to that war was championed, by this narrative of we're essentially going to go in and save these poor, oppressed women. And the reality is the Taliban they're horrible people. They're rank misogynists. They're incredibly cruel and backwards and absolutely were and are awful to women in Afghanistan. It doesn't necessarily follow that the U.S. needs to invade the country, right? So we can hold both of those things at once, that the Taliban are awful for a whole lot of reasons, including their treatment of women. And also that was that war was, I don't know that I want to get into whether or not it was justified. I think it's more complicated than the Iraq War, for example, but that there were a series of failures, in how that war was managed and handled, and that it is time for us now to be out. But also that in pulling out, we are leaving behind a lot of women, a lot of people, translators, folks who helped the U.S. And we're breaking a series of promises to them. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't pull out. It does mean that perhaps the way we do that, but I do think it's possible to do a little more right by people than we are currently doing.
So, yeah, great answer. I want to ask you, let's leave Afghanistan and come back to America, hard pivot, which I'll continue to do, not having any segue ability, Jill, to talk about the next piece of yours that I'd like to discuss. This weekend, we're talking on, what day is it? The 30th. This weekend, of course, July 4th weekend. Everybody's putting out their American flags. They're bunting. Everybody's a patriot and so on. You have a great piece over at CNN.com titled GOP Hypocrisy on Gwen Berry and the National Anthem. Gwen Berry, of course, is a track and field star who on the Olympic trials in Oregon last week.
Centuries in the making.
Oops. Last week in Oregon, I clicked on your piece. It started playing the ad.
I hate that autoplay video. It drives me nuts.
I don't know which one they put on your ad. But anyway, back to the piece in Gwen Berry. You're talking about what it means to be patriotic. And you're addressing the many folks on the right in Congress, Dan Crenshaw, Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton, Scott Walker, who all mostly tweeted criticizing Gwen Berry for protesting the anthem. And I'm kind of shorthanding what she did. Why is this? How do we define patriotism in 2021 and black athletes in the history there when they've got the prominent stage? What is wrong with the criticism here? It's a great piece. I'm not doing a good job recapping it.
Well, thank you for the kind words about it. I mean, to me, what the Gwen Berry story shows, and just a tiny bit of background for anyone who hasn't followed it, she stood up on the platform. She placed third. She's a hammer thrower in the Olympic trials. As the national anthem played, she turned around so that she, had her back to the flag and held up a T-shirt that said activist athlete. And the reaction to that from a lot of prominent Republicans, including folks like Dan Crenshaw, was to essentially demand that she be removed from the Olympic team. Ted Cruz tweeted that she hates America. So Tom Cotton also said that she should perhaps not be on the Olympic team. And the whole story to me just encapsulated the difference between kind of left and right views of patriotism. That for the right, the more offensive things you can do are, not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, not recite the national anthem. That it's a kind of patriotism that, that I think is relatively shallow. For me, what is admirable about America is not the flag, is not, these kind of performing patriotic duties. It's our Constitution. It's the set of values that, we don't always live up to, but that we are in this constant project of trying to live up to. And one of those values is the freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and the right to peacefully protest. Many countries, and certainly most places throughout history, have not accorded citizens those very, very basic rights to protest their own government. I mean, that's, I think, a hugely admirable thing about the United States. Again, we don't always live up to that promise, but we've made the promise. And the Americans that I admire most are the ones who try to make sure that we keep it. And, and so to me, it's pretty fundamentally un-American and deeply unpatriotic to demand that Gwen Berry, or Colin Kaepernick or any of these folks be penalized for doing something that is protected under the Constitution that all of us are claiming, certainly conservatives, are claiming that they love and want to defend.
So well said. And everybody should read this whole piece at CNN.com. I'll include it in the links. You also have a piece in the New York Times this week, and it's a great piece. And then you expand upon that in your Substack newsletter because they only give you just so many words in the New York Times. It's so important, the work that you're doing. I want to get to your book, but this one is titled, I love the New York Times. I interviewed my friend, Dr. Aaron Carroll, who also had a piece in the New York Times opinion guest essay section, which you do, and they title them very good. Women are having fewer babies because they have more choices, is what they titled your piece. There are conservative arguments. There are liberal arguments. There is your argument. Everybody has personal arguments. What is happening, Jill? This is such an important issue.
Yeah, so new birth rate statistics came out, I think a few weeks or months ago. The pandemic has shrunk my sense of time. Yeah. But essentially the birth rate is falling and is falling pretty significantly. That is kind of the story of most of human history, right? With the exception of the baby boom, which was a blip. As women become more educated, as societies modernize, women have babies later, they have fewer of them. And yet, every time these statistics come out that show that birth rates are down from previous years, there's kind of a whole freak out. I would say it happens mostly on the right, that, conservative, I think they would self-identify as pro-family folks, feel like, feminism has essentially ruined the traditional family, that it has tricked women into thinking that they want jobs. And then women, forgot to have babies and everyone is sad. That I think is it's a little more complicated than that. Yeah. But I think you see kind of a panic even on the left as well. And I think the left has better arguments, but the argument essentially is that birth rates are down, because we have terrible family supporting policies in the US. We don't have paid parental leave. Young people are in tremendous student loan debt. We can't afford to buy houses, all of which is obviously true, but doesn't really take into account the fact that birth rates are also down and age of first birth is also way up in countries that have very generous family policies. So policy is probably a piece of this, but it definitely is a story. And so the piece that I was writing was essentially saying why we need to frame lower birth rates as presumptively bad thing. That maybe, yes, for some women, what this reflects is a lack of choices. There's no question that's true. But when you look at where birth rates are the lowest and where they've gone down the most, where age of first birth is the highest, it's essentially some of the most privileged women in the entire span of human history, right? So it tends to be women living in counties where job opportunities are growing, where it's women who are more likely to have college degrees and even graduate degrees. It's women who actually do have do have a lot of options. And a lot of those women, are choosing to have fewer kids. And that is not necessarily, I think a story of something sad or something missing. I think it's a story of a landscape of expanded opportunity and more options. And, that women, like all other adult human beings, weigh a whole series of things that they want, right? And make choices accordingly. So, maybe in theory at 25, you want 3 kids. And then by the time you're 40, your life looks really different and your desires change. I don't think that's a bad thing. And I'm not sure why we are so insistent on framing it that way. I think we can still push for the policies that families need without assuming that a decrease in birth rates is necessarily reflective of some sort of suffering.
It feels like that, in Europe, there's still a pretty healthy safety net. And there are incentives in a lot of countries to have children, meaning, something like universal pre-K or daycare or all kinds of other incentives, so that if you are someone who's considering having a child, that you can afford it. The Biden administration, Democrats want to pass what some economists are calling, the most important kind of government program and aid for women and families that we've ever seen. It would, a lot of people who I respect are surprisingly not very cynical. They're really honest and hopeful about some of these ideas. And I wonder what you think if on paper some of these ideas actually are passed, some of them actually become law, and families get the type of money that they need, which is a great incentive to have children, which is what everybody seemingly, not everybody, as you just said, but, countries, societies want to encourage.
Yeah, I think it would be amazing and very, very much past time that we had many of these policies. I think many of the Biden proposals, frankly, don't go far enough, although given the dearth of options for women and family in this country, it would be enormous. I think things like, essentially giving people extra money every month for their kids. France does that. It is so crucial. Paid parental leave is so crucial. Some sort of universal pre-K, which I don't think we're going to see in the next couple of years, but that would be crucial. That's so necessary. And I do think there is some universe in which that would perhaps, juice birth rates a little bit, but it's not going to bring us back to the days of the 3-child family. I think that is much less to do with policy and much more to do with women's progress and the various, competing things that we want in our lives, and men as well. So to me, the framing for family policy is not this will encourage women to have more children. It's families need this, and we are a wealthy, developed, prosperous country. And, it's frankly shameful that we assume that women will just shoulder all of the burden or most of the burden, of raising children, will sacrifice the many, many other things they want in their lives without any help from the state. It's not necessary. It's cruel. It's counterproductive. And why not give people more options to create what they think is a good life, whatever that looks like, right? Whether they have kids or not, or 2 kids or 1 kid instead of 3. I'm not sure the goal or the framing should be this will encourage higher birth rates. I think the framing should be this will let people live better, happier, healthy lives, including kids.
Yes, really well said. Much better framing. But it's also, you can take some of the emotion and some of the things that liberals want, to ease burdens, to end suffering out of it and say, listen, this is healthy investment for society, any society. And you think about how a government spends its money, if that's a moral, if a budget is a moral document, kind of, you look at how we spend money. And if you're a fiscal conservative, I always try to change that framing. If you really want to invest in this case, in America, you want to invest in these policies for that reason. We're more prosperous, we're more secure, more happy, however you measure that. If we, in fact, have places that can watch our kids so that we can go to work, if we have
kids being educated at what experts in education say is the most crucial time of their development, universal pre-K. So forget about the passion that liberals care about. This is good for everybody in every society. And there's so much proof that this is an investment that's so much more bang for the buck. How am I doing?
Yes, absolutely. These are pro-child policies too, right? And the same party that claims to be pro-life and care about babies seems to not care very much as soon as they're born. And so I think that also is a helpful way to frame this, that there is very good social science on, what happens when children are supported, when they come into the world, when their families are supported. We know that growing up in poverty, in scarcity, has tremendous impacts on a child's future, on the development of their brains and their bodies. And yet, despite being, one of the most prosperous countries in the history of the world, we are not providing our children with the basics. And the way you provide children with the basics is you provide that to their parents. And I think it's just inexcusable that we don't do that. And I think, that is perhaps the way to talk about it, instead of, maybe this will make women have more babies so that we have future workers, so that we can all get our Social Security paid for.
Well said. Well said. I appreciate that you keep coming back to the changing the framing around it to one that is not necessarily focused specifically on women and their choices and incentives. Your book is so good. I mean, we can talk about both your books and one that you contributed to, the essays to, but most recently, your book is Okay, Boomer. Let's talk how my generation got left behind. I'd have to spend hours, and I've watched some other interviews with you on the book, and I highly recommend that people get it. It's such an important, but it's hard to talk about the differences in generations because we generalize so much, and anybody can take an anecdote and cherry pick. Well, people I know, women I know, men I know, black people, white people I know, had to do this, had to do that. But you actually, are a journalist, and you look at the research, you look at the data, and you do a great job in this book helping us understand, frankly, the advantages that our parents and our parents' generation had. And you also are good to separate in terms of, the different opportunities that from Gen X to millennials or Gen Z, which is kind of a catch-all, I think you say. It's so important, and I don't know, where to start or end. We've only got a few minutes left, but what are the most important, what's a top-line summation of your book and why you wrote it right now?
Yeah, I would say the top-line summation is that what I was trying to look at is what is the landscape of opportunity that baby boomers grew up in versus the world that millennials grew up in. And I think those differences are where a lot of this conflict stems from. But I think often boomers don't, clarifying, like not all boomers, right? But that many boomers who complain about millennials, which I think is especially conservative boomers, don't fully grasp the degree to which, frankly, members of their generation kind of changed the game when they hit adulthood. The degree to which, the cost of college education has skyrocketed at the same time as grants. College have really bottomed, that the cost of renting an apartment and buying a house is many times more expensive than it was when baby boomers were our age, right? All of this obviously is taking inflation into account. That millennials grew up in a period of great urbanization where, yes, we like living in cities, many of us, but it's also the case that jobs are in cities, which are, much more expensive. It is the case that as much as, we think about racial equality being kind of in an upward trajectory, an African-American who was buying a house a young African-American was more likely to own a home, before the Voting Rights Act than a Black millennial is today. Right. Yep. So it has not been, a straight line of progress, and that as inequality has, rapidly expanded and kind of yawned open, and far fewer people have a lot, and many people have not very much. Part of that is an age gap as well, that many of the have-nots are millennials. And it's not just because of where we are in our careers. When you compare us to where our boomer parents were at this point, it is looking like we are just never going to financially catch up.
Anybody can cherry pick people they know, but to stay general, you talk about how this country used to invest in entire communities with programs. And yes, you're always good to separate out, minorities and how they didn't have the same opportunity. But generally speaking, there were programs, there were investments into entire communities. And now families basically invest in their own kids. So any parent out there listening could say, listen, I did everything I could to help my kid out. I still pay my kid's cell phone bill, my kid's rent, and so on. And that therein lies the difference. That's not how any society, how any country really can function successfully. It can't be on an individual basis. There has to be opportunity for education, for employment, for healthcare that wide swaths, in this case, an entire generation has, versus, oh my gosh, I'm lucky enough to have inherited a little chunk of money that I can use that to pay for my kid's college. See, I paid for my kid's college. It's preposterous to cherry pick those.
Right. And I mean, it's something I hear a lot from boomers. I think one thing I would say is that I think a lot of boomers, it's not like they're trying to ruin the world. My parents are the same way. They invested a lot in my sister and I. And I do think that's part of the story of boomer parenthood. I think many of them did that, kind of up against a backdrop of a country that was increasingly not investing in its young people. I mean, one statistic that jumps out I always kind of keep it front of mind is that when boomers were young, when they were kind of coming into the world, the federal government spent $1 on entitlements, things like Social Security and Medicare. For every $3 it spent on future investments, things like education and infrastructure. Now those numbers are reversed. So we're spending $3 on entitlements for every dollar we're planning for the future. And by the time all baby boom age, that number will have gone up to $5 in entitlements for every dollar that we spend on future investments. And that doesn't mean that, millennials think we should gut Social Security and Medicare. That's certainly not what anybody's saying. What we're saying is that we just kind of want a piece of the pie too. Like we would like to be invested in the way that boomers were. And that is what has really been scaled back throughout the course of our lives, particularly when we were younger. A lot of the book, frankly, comes back to Ronald Reagan, who I think was, the one of the most disastrous forces for shaping millennial life in ways that I think most of us don't quite grasp. But a lot of this stuff was set in policy, well before many of us were born, and certainly before many of us had an opportunity to vote for who was representing us. And we are the ones that are living with the consequences.
Yeah, I've argued with my dad about this. I mean, we're not on completely separate pages on a lot of things, but when you say it's not their fault, I say, listen, because he gets, personally offended, and rightfully so if he takes it, maybe the wrong way. But it's like, I'm not blaming you per se, Dad. I'm blaming your generation, and including now, for continuing to vote, especially white folks, for continually to vote for people and policies that are continuing to exacerbate this trend, which, of course, Jill, you've written a whole book about. So it's like, it's not your fault per se, but and this is true of a lot of issues, it's the people and policies that you are supporting potentially.
Definitely. I mean, I think one thing that's also underappreciated is that boomers are a really politically divided generation. I think a majority of them tend to vote conservative in presidential elections, but they kind of are split down the middle between liberal and conservative in how they identify. And so I think often, the folks who are listening to me tend to be the liberal half of the generation. And they're like, well, what are you talking about? Like we were on the front lines of feminism. We, were the young people who made up, the ranks of the civil rights movement. We protested the Vietnam War. We were at Stonewall. And all of that is true, right? The sort of lefty boomers, I think, very much have won the cultural war, but it's been the conservative boomers who have won American politics. I think kind of across the board, even within the Democratic Party to some extent. And that has really shaped, not just the kind of cultural norms within which millennials grew up, which were very much shaped by the boomer left, but the economic an opportunity landscape that millennials grew up in was shaped by the boomer right. And it's been a huge disaster for us.
If you want to know more, you're going to have to get the book. You're going to have to subscribe right now, jill.substack.com. Follow her on Twitter, read her at CNN.com, New York Times. Sign up for a yoga retreat. My wife is, I bet you maybe I'll get that for her as a gift. I think she would love spending time with you and other writers in Italy. That sounds very exciting. Jill, so great to finally get you on the podcast. I hope we can do it again soon. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Pete.
All right, Jill Filipovic. Did I get it right then? Jill Filipovic. She's awesome, no matter how you want to pronounce her name. She doesn't care. Jill.substack.com. You won't be sorry if you subscribe to her daily newsletter, and I'm really happy to finally get her on the podcast. I've been trying for a while. Jill.substack.com. Get her new book, Okay, Boomer, How My Generation Got Left Behind. So important, so good, so nuanced on such important issues for us to understand. And now I'm very happy to share with you my hour-long conversation. I called John Carroll up last night. I wanted to learn more about him. John and I have been talking off the air since I left SiriusXM. He had been listening to the SiriusXM show for years, probably over 10 years. He'd called in before, but I really didn't know who he was. I'd seen him on Twitter, and I just didn't know, and I'm not going to regret that time that I lost not knowing exactly who he was, but I am going to cherish the time I've gotten to get to know him and look forward to getting to know him better. And now everybody gets to know John a little bit better, a fascinating life that he has led. He's a Grammy Award-winning singer and songwriter, of course, one of the founding members of the Starland Vocal Band, and he has just done everything he can in music. I'm so glad to have him as part of our community. Here is now my great conversation. We went all over the place. He took me all over, and it was such a fun ride. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Here we go. You're my guest on Stand Up with Pete Dominick. I'm very, very happy to have you in my life, and I'm super happy to have you on the show today. And it's all to celebrate you, your influence on me, your influence on the community that we've built together, and this song and how it's become our anthem for the show. So first and foremost, I just want to thank you for everything that you've done for me and for us. I've really grown to
Pete,
love and respect you. So thank you very, very much from the very, very bottom of my heart. In other words, I don't have the handle on language. I don't have the handle on vocabulary you do, sir.
Well, at the end of the day, we all have our own vocabulary now, don't we?
See?
You know, you don't realize the first time maybe it was the second time that I called in to your show when you worked at that corporation. I almost had an accident. I missed my turn off, and I literally like squealed around, and I thought, this is the time someone's going to have an accident while calling in to a radio show.
Okay.
And it almost happened. But I don't know how you do it. I mean, just over the years, and that was probably 10 years ago.
Mm.
And you probably do recall every conversation that you had one way or another, right? I mean, under hypnosis,
It's hard. I wish I could.
Yeah.
My brain isn't one for that to begin with, but the volume over the years, it's interesting just to be the host of this show for so long, and people come and they go, and you connect their voice to maybe they called, maybe they emailed, maybe they tweeted, and so it's sometimes difficult. But I only really got to know who you were when I left that corporation, and that is another special.
I wrote you an email.
Yep.
Of encouragement, because it just seemed like that was a turning of a page for a lot of people. And now, I'm sure you must be gobsmacked with folks who just kind of weigh in about what your show and that channel meant to them. I carried that gospel for a long time and told everybody, no, if I'm a musician, and it's satellite radio is great. If you travel a lot, you don't lose the station when you 3 counties away. And, but I'm a musician and listen to a lot of music, but I'm telling you what I'm listening to mostly are the shows that are on this Insight channel. And before that was the POTUS channel. And it was just amazing the scope and ways in which the dimension of your life's enrichment through the conversations that you had and still do have. And that's why, I'm just happy that you're still doing it.
and that you do it the way, the way that you see fit to do it. And you call those shots. And I think it's worthy of everyone's efforts to keep you doing it more and more,
What I really appreciate all that, of course. What was it like? I want to talk about I'm no expert on music, but I can hold my own in terms of asking you some questions that I think that you'll have great answers to. But before I get to music and
like the time you played what you thought was a Starlane vocal band, but it was ABBA.
Listen, I don't. That must have been my assistant. I wouldn't make that kind of offensive mistake. It's like it's almost as bad as when I introduced my wife to who I thought was Chadwick Boseman, but it was actually Anthony Mackie. That was pretty awful. But, I've had a long list of those types of very visible,
it happens to the both of us, but it happens to the both of us.
I live for them. So your influences, though, I'm interested in hear about, music for sure. But why are you what are your influences on life and on politics? Like, why even tune into a POTUS channel, an Insight channel? Why are you interested in politics and history and in social issues and social justice? Like, when did that start for young John Carroll? Was it music that did it?
Yeah. Well, my life story is very strange, and I forget that it's been strange until I start talking about it to someone else, and they start looking at me like, "What? Oh, how old were you when you did that?" Go, it's okay. It was just a little bit of acid, and it was in my juice cup. No, it was just early on. Like anyone who has any kind of performance talent, and in certain ways, I kind of resent show business as it's termed in the West. And folks say, oh, John, he's the talented one, right? And even when I was a kid, I would bristle because I would see my older brother and my sister and say, no, my brother's an amazing athlete and he's got pipes, and my sister's this actress. And just because I happen to climb up on a piano bench and play something that made sense when I was very young, and that kind of started early on. My older brother and sister saw me sing something, and I played something on one of those little Magnus organs, and I was maybe 2, and it made sense, whatever it is that I played. I was Next thing I know, I'm on stage in talent shows singing Shortening Bread, and at the age of 4, and that's the cool thing now, from that to playing piano and being in bands when I was young with older kids, and then having there be reason to continue to do it because someone thinks you'd be a good addition to their group one way or the other, and you start doing it more and more. But looking back on the arc of what it was that I learned and observed as that 4-year-old, as the next year, as the 5-year-old in the same auditorium, seeing my father in a show that had minstrels, had black-faced minstrels that came out during, and that was the funny part of the show. And I was 5 years old, and all I knew is that everybody was laughing. Right. This was Fredericksburg, Virginia, and I mentioned it to my dad in the car on the way home. Oh, the black-faced guys were funny. Like they were clowns, they act like clowns. Right. And seeing my dad's jaw start to clench and him saying, well, they're not going to do that anymore. And that wasn't actually very funny.
Wow.
And I went, oh, okay. How come? Because it makes fun of colored people, and it's not nice, and it hurts a lot of people's feelings. In those days, they were colored people. Right. In Virginia, we called them colored people. And that stuck with me throughout that year. And the next year I went back to the same show, and I remember thinking, what are they going to do for the funny thing if they're not going to do it again this year?
Oh, that's interesting.
And I remember hearing the siren kind of go up, something that announced the beginning of the second act, and the curtain opens, and there were those guys, and they came out and they did exactly the same bit that I recognized from the year before, but their faces were painted bright white. And I remember at the time thinking, I see what they're doing. And, you know, as a 5-year-old kid, I was between 5 and 6, thinking, this ain't right, you know? And that is, when you look around and you see what's happening, and you see all of the black people live in the neighborhood over next to the fairgrounds, and they have their own high school that they go to. Right. And they have the best fucking band in the parade, though. Scary good. Right? And I was there with my dad that day, and the Walker Grant band was the band that kicked ass and stepped high and was just in it and had it and prideful getting it. And they knew that they were better than those white bands, Stafford County and whatever. And so we had a housekeeper, and we had, and this was during the 60s, man. This was, I'll always remember Dorothy Washington coming, and RFK had been shot. And she came and showed up at the door, and she looked pale. And she said, "Oh, Miss Carroll, they're going to kill them all." And so I guess what I'm saying is I was a child of the 60s in that regard. I don't remember specifically that's why Washington was burning, and I saw it on the television. I wasn't exactly sure why it was, but I knew it had to do about that. Anyway, one thing leads to another. And yes, I was with one of my best friends in front of the White House the day Nixon resigned, and we followed it. And I was in high school, and I followed what that was all about. Not specifically enough to know the nuance and to know why and how he was brought down, but I was certainly aware of it enough at the time to know that he was not the right guy to have as president. And we were really excited and happy to be there at the White House. And we were singing, and we listened on the radio in front of the White House when he announced his resignation, and we all cheered, and it was a happy day, you know? And at that point I was old enough, that was a senior in high school. So I was old enough to know what that was all about in large stroke terms, you know, in the broad strokes of it. So, and then,
Well, what was the family dynamic like for you growing up?
It was interesting, you know. In Fredericksburg, I had my childhood, and my childhood was until about 10 years old, and my dad became sick and died. And you know, I love it when you have guests on that talk about the legacies of families and how that. You know, the older we get, I believe, the more sense we make of why we are the way we are from the way we were raised, and how, you know, just the things you'll notice the thing in your own, just how you fold the toilet paper on your knee, or something. You know, it's like, wow, that's like God, I'm my dad, you know. But the behavioral things that all families have. In my family, I had two families up until the time my dad died, and that was in 1967.
How old were you when your dad passed away?
I was 10. And so he was sick for a good while beforehand. I didn't know it was cancer till I read it in the paper afterwards. Jesus, I said, my dad didn't have cancer. He had a tumor. And my next door neighbor said, well, honey, that is what cancer is. Okay. But it was largely kept away from me and my younger sister, because we were, you know, 9 and 5 and 10 and 6. And so, that family had its own dynamic. And if I want to learn more about that, I have my older brother and sister to actually ask about it. It's like, what happened how did we end up driving to Florida that night? Well, this is what happened. Mom didn't let go of it. She said, we're going to Florida. and Dad finally caved in. And that's why we drove all night to Florida. And we almost had an accident and killed us, whatever it is. But you don't know that stuff when you're a kid, so it's fun to have the older folks, the elders in any family, check in with them before they're gone, because they have the scoop on all the shit that you were too young to know was happening at the time. Right.
If you're lucky to have them. Yeah.
If you're lucky to have them. Yeah.
So
and I really, So, and then the second, that was a squirrely time. After my dad died, and I was, I guess, privy to one of those predators that, and it was the Big Brothers of America Association, who was, I remember thinking, why am I getting a big brother when I already have a big brother? Well, my big brother was 18, 19, and it was 60s. Things were crazy. This was in the midst of the Vietnam War. All this shit was happening. So things were quite mad. And then the family having that loss, and I don't know if any family that is there's a great movie called Men Don't Leave that really captured the dynamic in a family that has that kind of loss. You need your family to lean on, and no one is strong enough to be leaned on. So it's just kind of chaotic and poignantly horrible for a while, And I had this guy who was supposed to take me fishing once every 2 weeks or something, or do something. He ended up being a pederast, which I think you should get back to these people who are throwing the shit at you out of nowhere. Just say, no, I'm not a pedophile. I'm not even a pederast, and see if they know. But he truly was, and I experienced that to the point where it was, I came real close to going on a canoe and camping trip to Canada with him, which he managed to do the next year with another kid, and did kidnap the kid. And I feel bad to this day, because it wasn't until I was well into adulthood, I thought, we should have checked back on that shit after we moved.
No.
Yeah. But they are out there, and, they're not everywhere. They're not everywhere, but.
Right. Were you assaulted? Did he molested you?
It got a creepy time. It got, you know what I mean?
I do. I had something happen. I've talked about it openly. It was creepy time for sure. Yeah. And that guy later.
And the thing is, there's a wonderful article. Perhaps you've even interviewed this fella. He's a naturist writer, writes beautifully. He wrote a piece that was in Harper's. It's called A Sliver of Sky. And then I happened to hear him be interviewed, I think on NPR, and, he not only experienced that to the full degree of
its you're talking about Barry Lopez. He just passed away.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah, Barry Lopez.
Beautiful, just a beautiful person, beautiful writer. Yeah, my God.
He's one of my mentors and hero and mentor.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, my friend Steve Chase, who's a listener and really good friend of mine, he, encouraged me to connect with him several times, and I never did, and I kind of regretted that. But you're referring to.
It happens.
He writes about. He's known for his excellent writing on nature, but Sliver of Sky is his confronting the trauma of his own sexual abuse, which is
and how it went down was so typical of how it goes down.
Yeah, it's a huge important piece.
You can't. The child has no. I've tried writing about this several times, and it's one of the main things that I wanted to have as a preface to the piece was, this is why we like to turn away from this stuff, because it kind of creeps us out, and it's kind of like an icky thing to talk about, right? Well,
yeah.
But but the thing to keep in mind, the kid doesn't know how to express it. The kid doesn't know anything other than what makes him happy and comfortable, right, or wary and uncomfortable. And that's even probably more articulate than any kid who's in a position where it's an adult, it's a person of authority. And, you know, my mother was cool enough and smart enough to know that when this trip that I was really excited about all of a sudden was something I wasn't so excited about, she knew something was up. And she called the guy who was the regional director and mentioned in passing. And my mother was pretty cool, probably to a fault, about sharing like everything. She had no problem talking about anything with me. She was one of these parents that's just like, Johnny, there's nothing wrong with this and this and this.
That's good.
But do it when you're in your own room. It's okay if you know what I mean. It was like, wow, okay. To the point where I knew she was so unabashed about talking about shit like that I would talk to other folks, friends of mine in high school, and that was like, what are you saying, man?
That's hilarious.
Made
That's
them
hilarious.
Uncomfortable. It's like, no, my mom.
She sounds
so cool.
That sounds good.
She was very cool and very upfront. And she said that she was talking to the guy and she had let slip that he had been over to the house 3 or 4 times last week or something. And he said, wait. How many times was he over at the house? And she said, yeah, he came over. And it was escalating. He was
building trust.
He was also getting kind of impatient and kind of eager. I think
God,
he was getting overly eager. No, it was creepy. Nothing horrible happened. It happened enough to know that wow, thanks, Ma, for not letting me go on this trip, you know. But then a year later, she was hanging up the phone as I got in from school, and she said, well, I guess we were right about that Alex guy.
Wow.
And I said, what? She said, well, there's a kid that you were in CCD with, and she mentioned the kid's name, and I did know the kid. I didn't know him well. I said, yeah. Well, they lost their father too. And so he they let him go they fired him from Big Brother, but he ingratiated himself somehow into the family post losing the dad, which is how it happens.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. They got the kid back, and prosecuted him. And I did a little follow up to see what I could find out about that. And I can't find any trace of him, but, so he's probably gone. But, this, it's just it's a real thing. And the thing that Barry Lopez really captured that was quite moving was what is taken from the child.
Right.
And he articulated that so lyrically and so horribly, sadly. But what is taken? I won't even try and paraphrase it. But
I'm so glad you bring it up, and I'm so sorry to hear about the experience that you had. But
it's interesting to see. That's part of the chapter.
Sure.
In any family.
Sure.
That, and we all have it. We all. When the crises were when you're in your family, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think it's super important to talk about openly, especially as men. And that's what Barry Lopez did. And I encourage people to read that article, watch him talk about it in interviews. He's very, very candid and open about it. And my understanding, I was never a real, true victim, certainly not in any way that it was a crucible event in my life. But my understanding is that when people, certainly that piece and his work gave a lot of explanation and permission and help people find closure in their lives, having had any kind of similar experience, which sadly it often apparently is, similar as you're saying.
It's just good to, the only reason I think that people do bring it up is the same thing that I was I became mortified with this. Oh my God, I knew, but it's like, no, my mom was going through all this shit, It's like, and I didn't even think about it at the time. I just thought, oh, wow, it happened. I was in 8th grade, oh, wow. But as adults, we know what signs we may have missed and signs that weren't missed, and maybe we can share that. It's not like everybody, they're out there. I remember telling a friend of mine this, and I said, yeah, I guess they kind of wait until the guy of the house is is gone. You know, that Ronan Farrow piece, or actually it's a recent one about the Woody and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's a great point made, is that if there's a man of the house, that shit generally won't happen. If there's a man in the house, not with the predator from outside, but they do scope it out. They do come in when there is. So it's good to kind of keep mindful of that, I guess, and it's not always, it's, you don't want to be caught up in it and worrying about that all the time. But, there are some, so I was talking to a friend of mine. I said, yeah, kind of that's pretty low, isn't it? And my friend said, John, it doesn't get any lower.
Yeah. I know. That's why being called that name, having your name anywhere near the word is like horrifying.
It's like, please.
What are we doing? So when does music become a really important thing in John Carroll's life? You founded the band when you were 18.
It always was. Yeah. Well, early on, I had a great piano teacher, and then I was in these talent shows, and I had this kind of, it had a formula where I played a classical piece and then I'd rip into this kind of boogie woogie thing, so they could bill it as like playing a classical piece and then an original boogie woogie composition. So I think when I was 10 and then when I was 12, I won the Kiwanis talent shows, and it was cool because my dad was alive when I was 10, so he got to see that.
That's awesome.
And then in between those years, I had a little band that I put together. It was a friend of mine. He played sax, and I played the organ, and his little brother played the maracas. And this kid, I can sing you the actual song that we played, and it was dun 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 dun. That was it. We played it over and over again for like a minute and a half. And I thought, this is really cool. We're going to be in the talent show. It's going to be the band. This is going to be great. And we didn't even make the cut. And it was the healthiest thing that could happen to me. Right. I was like, okay, you got to serve some shit up that's good. So you're not going to make the cut, You win it this year, but you may not do shit next year, But so I went back to the same thing when I was 12. And at that point, my older sister, she went to the school downtown in Fredericksburg, James Monroe. And there was this great variety show that they had. And the band was great. One of the numbers was like a Supreme send up, and these gals came out and they did Stop in the Name of Love. And the band was great, and they had horns. And I asked my sister about them, and she said, oh yeah, that's the Blues Machine. They're a real band. And I said, oh, that's cool. Now I had been playing in the band with a good friend of mine in junior high, Cheryl Hoovler. Her older brother had a band. Now, I played Farfisa organ in that band. And I don't know if you know, Pete, the difference between like a Farfisa organ or a Jaguar organ and a Hammond organ, right?
Well, I do, and I can explain it, but I'll let you, for the audience, you probably can explain it better than I can. Sometimes I get them mixed up, but you go ahead.
Well, the electronic organ that you hear in Eric Burdon and the Animals' House of the Rising Sun, right? Or the organ in the Doors, come on and touch me, baby, or light my fire. Those organs, they're electronic organs. That's Farfisa organ or a Vox Jaguar. The organ you hear on Born to Be Wild by Steppenwolf, that's a Hammond organ. The Booker T and the MGs, Hip Hugger, Green Onions, that's a Hammond organ, and it goes through a Leslie tone cabinet, and it's an entirely different animal. And that was the first time I probably heard that organ was at the variety show at my sister's high school. Now, we had a housekeeper after my dad died named Marie Williams, and she she and I became real good friends. She was one of my early mentors, and she was this beautiful, beautiful Black woman, and she would sit at the piano with me. I'd get home from school, and she'd play these songs, and I'd look at it and say, Marie, you're playing in the key of A flat, And I was like 11, and A flat and G flat, they're kind of tough keys if you're used to playing in the white keys, right? On Black churches, you'll notice gospel music and the hymns they sing in Black churches, a lot of times they're on the Black keys. And they just are. They're in Black keys, which is the Black keys on a keyboard. Those are the flats and the sharps, right? And she played me a 45 single that she had made with a friend of mine at church, and we made a record, and I would like to play it for you.
Wow!
On the upstairs, the grown-up stereo, right? And I said, okay. She said, we don't need to tell your mama, because we the kids were only allowed to play on the downstairs stereo. That's where we played Sam and Dave records and Jimi Hendrix and Booker T and the MG. But the upstairs, we only played like show tunes and Roger Miller records and stuff. And I said, sure. She put it on, and it was her at the piano, and her friend, my lady friend, was playing the organ. And it was just piano and organ. And she was singing what I later learned was a Mahalia Jackson record, If I Can Help Somebody. And it goes like, if I can help somebody as I travel along. And she's playing this piano, and the organ's just, and it's just pumping and a humping. And my life changed that day because I heard something that was moving everything I had to be moved. And it was just piano and organ and this beautiful voice that she had singing Mahalia Jackson's If I Can Help Somebody. And then she said, and that's why I'm here. I'm helping you all because you need help right now after you lost your daddy. And which really, I could relate to. And I said, God, I felt really good about it. I loved her. And she said, I want to ask your mother, but I want to ask you first. If you'd like to come to my church, I'd like to invite you to my church. And I'm thinking, if that's what they do at your church, yeah, yeah, sure. And she says, well, that's not all I want you to do. I'd like you to come to my church and play. And I said, oh, wow. Great. And she said, and then I'd like you to get up and preach. And then she must have seen that I didn't know what to think about that. I was kind of scared. And she said, now don't worry. We have a minister and he knows all about the scriptures and he does that. I don't mean to preach like that, but I want you to get up and tell the congregation, that about the gift that God has given you and that you want to use your gift to help people.
Wowee.
And I said, yes. And the funny thing is, Pete, I didn't get to ask about it until years later when my mother was on her deathbed. But that was the last day I saw Marie Williams, right? And I didn't know what happened to her. I didn't think about it too much, but I asked her about it later. And my mom said, oh yeah, she had some funny ideas. And I thought, well, I didn't think she had too funny. All the ideas that she ever expressed to me were pretty right on, right? And I loved her. She was great. But then I thought, yeah, my mom was trying to get on her feet, right? She had to deal with a guy that was trying to kidnap her kid, abuse her kid, whatever. She had to go back to school, get a job, which in those days she had never had a job. Mm. So I'm sure Marie Williams probably did come to my mother and ask about bringing me to the church. And my mother says, last thing I need right now is the housekeeper stealing my kid to the black church. And in those days, we would listen to Aretha Franklin, and my mother would say, "You like that?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." I was just a kid, and she said, "It just sounds like angry black women hollering, right?" And I thought, okay, if it sounds that way to you, I couldn't do much about that, but I got kind of where she was coming from. But it wasn't until later on, I remember listening to Brooke Benton's Rainy Night in Georgia, and we listened to the whole thing together, and she said, "That's a nice vocal performance right there."
Wow, that's so. Yeah. I mean, like having that woman in your home, building that trust with you and introducing music to you, kind of like, I mean, usually, I feel like it usually doesn't happen that way. Usually you kind of discover things like going out into the world. Rarely does somebody come into your house and say, just between you and I, here's another version of the art that you love. And then also recognizing your talent. I mean, that is.
She knew what she was doing. Yeah, you're right. You're right. She knew. She was like, okay. She probably saw something. She saw my eyes lighten up when she played that record, right? And that's why she knew I wanted to play this record for you. Yeah. And it comes down to, this thing about families. And, I have families within my family and the nuclear family. And I see, all right, these parents have instilled in their kids a hunger for learning. Not a hunger for learning. Screw that. A hunger for discovering things. And you can see it immediately in those kids. It's like, this is cool. Oh, what's that? What's that? What's that? And that's going to be the thing that's going to shape how they face the world. And, I lament sometimes that the way that, the American dream of having the nice house with the garage and the car and being able to take the vacation. And, it's not that. Life is not about that, right? And we knew the kids in high school that were going to be about that. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be the kids that they were not going to try sushi because food's supposed to be cooked, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And now we're in this point where, boy, we get, it's like, in those days, we call them squares, right? We knew who the squares were. Right. We knew who the hip guys were, right? And the guys are, this is cool, man. Listen to this. This is Santana, man. This is great, man. They play this in Venezuela, man. I turned on this song when we lived in Caracas, And then the kid that's like, I don't know, people don't speak English here, and just insulated, nowhere folks.
Yeah, it's like the difference between people that are, without even judgment, that are curious and want to discover the differences that the world has to offer versus those who feel more safe with, what they know. I mean, there's a certain...
Yeah, where do you suppose that's from? I mean, are they afraid they're going to be teased or something?
Tribalism, safety, insecurity. I don't know. Like when I grew up in an all, pretty homogenous town, talk about music. I mean, there wasn't that, there was just white boy bands. I mean, it was like Guns N' Roses, Dave Matthews, U2, R.E.M. There wasn't a lot of different kinds of genres of anything, much less music.
So did you have a friend that turned you on to a type of music that you weren't, or maybe the other way around, which is something that you felt was your truth. And everybody has it, that point of inflection where somebody tightens you up about something. When you say something about the queer or the guy, I say, hey, wait a minute, man. What did you say?
I had a brother. My big brother was that friend. He was that person constantly. I don't know where he came from or why he was the way he was, but he was radicalized at a young age, and he tells me now it was because of actual punk rock and certain musicians, of all of which I'm sure you're familiar with. But he was just a nonconformist that way, and both on sexism and racism. My brother put me through a clinic when I was young. I don't know if I've ever said this on the record, but it happened, and I like to be honest. My mom taught in the city school of Syracuse, and she had a lot of black students, and one of them I knew and became kind of friendly with, and I had like his picture up on my wall. And my brother was in my room, and I go, "Isn't he such a cute little N-word?" But I didn't say the word. I said something probably even worse, like lit, like piglet.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that about this kid, like I thought I was being cute or I thought I was being fun. And my brother was there. I said it to him. I'll never forget it because I felt a sharp pain in my ribs where he had punched me very hard in the ribs, like really hard when I said that word. And that was it. Like, that was his way of communicating to me, like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, why would you ever utter that word? That's mom's student. You know him. Like, why? And then there was the I can't quite think of more specific moments when it came to, like, women and girls, but he, again, was my role model for all of that. And then when I moved to New York City, before I moved to New York City after 2 years of college, and I should say in college, I was exposed to a lot of diversity, especially black folks from New York City. And when I moved to New York, when I was 18, he wrote me a letter, which I still have framed, which is about welcoming the things that make me feel uncomfortable. And so he was that person in my life all the time. And, all of my success is due to him.
And this another fellow in college that you met, or your brother?
No, my brother. Like, my brother wrote me this letter when I moved to New York. But I mean, the experience I had in college sounds, that's the experience for me that was indelible. I mean, I hung out with, mostly all black guys from New York City. And it was because of what we're talking about. I was like, I just was bored with the people I grew up with. I was curious about people who were different. It just so happened these guys, kind of took me in. And that was because of humor. Like, it wasn't music, it was comedy. Yeah. And so they taught me. So, but back to you. So
well, that's the thing, right? You got to do this thing that took you into other circles of cultures.
Yeah, I wanted to be. To me, that was,
and you wanted to. Yeah. And at the same time, so when I was in high school, this sort of stormy childhood, or whatever, these strange transitions and stuff that happened. But I was always playing music, and there's this weird thing early on. We came to DC, Washington DC, and I was kind of a hot shit little kid in Fredericksburg. But, went into talent shows, and I was in shows and playing piano and stuff, and I was in bands and with older kids. But then we moved to the last half of middle of eighth grade, which is like the worst time anybody want to move any. It's a tough year anyway, right? Wherever you are. And we came from public school back into parochial school midway through eighth grade, Tinley Circle, Washington, D.C. And for some reason, no one gave a damn about, I had one good friend, the Caracas, Venezuela kid who we played music, and he squared me up with a graduation party band at the end of the year. And I couldn't make any friends. I had a couple of good friends. That's all I needed. But I noticed that, man, these other boys, man, they don't want to have anything to do with me, right? They don't. I mean, it was like, excuse me, what page did she say we're on? It's like, yeah, man, it should turn their back to me, And so my mother bought this house. We were going to move to Alexandria, Virginia, and it was going to be too soon if I ever saw these kids again the rest of my life, except for a couple of them. And the girls were very nice. The girls were nice because girls are nicer. But in the backyard, there was a band at this graduation party, and Mark DiStefano comes on and says, "Hey, man, you're going to play with the band." I said, "What?" So he's framing me up with this band, and I don't know what I'm going to do. But by the time I get up there, it's like, no, you're not going to play. You're going to sing. We're going to have a battle of the singers. And she sang White Rabbit or something, and I sang House of the Rising Sun like there was no tomorrow, and just had a great time singing with this band, singing like there was no tomorrow. And everybody thought it was great. And this one kid who was one of the kids who were worse to me all year long comes up and says, "Hey, you want to come over tomorrow and shoot some pool?" And I was like, I looked at him and I was like, yeah, okay. And he goes, hey, man, you're all right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right.
So he said, when you first came into and he it was kind of cool of him actually, because he wanted to explain, right? What the deal was. He said, when you came into the class, we all thought you were a hick because you had a Southern accent.
All right.
Right. So that was the first time like, oh, well, thanks for letting me know. And just because I can sing this one fucking song, you want to be my friend now?
Hell yeah.
You know what I mean?
Hell
it's
yeah.
Like,
I mean,
come on, man. So
yeah, it sounds like a movie.
These little lessons, right? And it's like, okay, all right, bigotry 101 in your face. I'd seen it with other people and I'd heard about it, but that's it, right? Right in my face. So
yeah, prejudice,
straight up. So I go to this really cool school, boys' school, Bishop Ireton High School, which is kind of funny considering what had happened earlier, but had no problem whatsoever in the Catholic boys' school. So, and the second day of school, I see this kid who I had seen in the school play, musical, the previous spring. And he was in 8th grade, but they let him be in the play because he was the best guy for the part. And he had brothers that went there. And there we are. And I noticed, I could call him and say, hey, you were in the play. You were Patrick Dennis in Maine. And he said, yeah. And he told me his name was Mike Cotter. And I said, my name was, and I said, I'm a musician too. And he goes, oh, we should do a group. We should do a duet. I write songs and play guitar. What do you play? I said, I play piano and some guitar. And he goes, yeah. And we started doing that. Just like that. And it was Mike Cotter that he was the angel of the rest of my life. Because from doing that, we were playing in a pizza parlor in West Springfield, Virginia. And this lady came in. And she said, you guys are pretty good. You should audition for the Hoot Nannies at the cellar door. And I said, that's that place on the corner. I see it when I drive up to my grandparents' house the previous year, And she says, yeah, it's like an open mic, but you have to audition for it. And you guys could be good for it. You sound like, we sang harmony. We were like the Everly Brothers sped up or something, We were like, there's somewhere between the Hanson and the Everly Brothers. We looked like Hanson, but we sound like the Everly Brothers. And so we went there and we auditioned and we played at the Hoots. And the cellar door was like the bitter end or something, or the village, in the village. It was a songwriter. Everybody played there. Tom Waits played there. Nina Simone played there. I saw everybody there eventually over the next few years, but that's where we met Bill and Taffy. And Bill and Taffy had a group called Fat City, and they had just done some touring with John Denver because Bill wrote Country Roads, most of it. Oh, wow. And they had done a few things the years before that. This was 1972, 73. And so then we're in the cellar door, and we can go to the cellar door and hang out. We played, and they, for some reason they let us do it without getting shut down by the liquor board or something. But we met Bill and Taffy, and Bill and Taffy they were mentors to us. They sort of adopted us, and
Bill Danoff, Taffy Danoff, husband and wife, and part of
they were
Starland Vocal Band,
right? So. Years later, not that many, seemed like a lot, but only a couple of years later, I get a call after coming home from college. I went to 1 year of college, the first semester at the University of Miami. But we played a lot of shows. And when I was in high school, we started playing around that circuit. And we played clubs on our own as Cotter and Carroll, and then we would play with Bill and Taffy when they would do bigger shows at bigger venues, and we would flesh out their sound with the harmony because I was good at figuring out vocal harmonies. And I would play piano, and Mike would play a second guitar to Bill's, and we would do vocal harmonies to all of their songs for shows at the Constitution Hall, DAR, and Kennedy Center, and it was really cool being in high school and be able to go out afterwards with John Prine to to hang out.
Jesus,
John Prine and Leon Redbone. And
you were still in high school and you were hanging out with the most legendary musicians of your time. I mean, were they then? Yeah. Were they as legendary now as they are? I mean, then as they are now.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Jesus. I didn't. I knew. Well, I could see from backstage when John Prine comes out to a 3,000 seat house that goes apeshit for him. That, okay, wait a minute, something's going on with this guy. Listen up.
So you've basically,
and lo and behold, he was a brilliant songwriter, and that was when being a musician and being in bands was pointed towards something more meaningful, which was writing songs and singing songs that meant something that could change people's way of looking at the world and moving people. And that was all around the cellar door. That was all right there in Georgetown, and then the Washington scene. And then I got a call from Bill and Taffy saying, "Hey, we owe on our contract 2 more sides with this RCA contract." And Billy always wanted to try having almost like a Mamas and the Papas type of vocal group. And would you be interested in doing that? I was like, yeah, get me out of here, because I was in college and we weren't playing. I wasn't doing shows. I was transcribing John Coltrane solos, which is not what I wanted to be doing at that time. But that was when, you got to see that world, and be a part of that world. And, I came back from that, and we from Miami, and that following winter went to Catholic University for the second semester, and while we rehearsed Starland Vocal Band, and then the following fall, we went up to New York with a record deal. John Denver had a new label, and we recorded that first album with Phil Ramone at A&R Studios.
Wow.
And then talked our way on to John Denver's tours, which made sense. We had to do a little talking to do it, but we did 3 tours that next year, and that's how Afternoon Delight became a hit.
So you toured with John Denver, meaning you did a whole bunch of dates with him opening for him?
Yeah. We would open the show, and that was one of the first tours that had the stage in the round in these big arenas. So they built a custom stage. No one had done that at that point. And in fact, that was the reason that we at first were not able to do the tour, or weren't going to be allowed to do the tour, because, we already built the stage and it's me on a turntable in the middle, and the band is at the 4 points of the compass around me. And there's 4 of you. I don't know how we do it. And it's like, you do it. Somebody said, you get the guy to build an extra piece of stage, come out. And I remember I played this tiny little piano, because in those days they didn't have digital pianos. So the guys had to bring a piano away from backstage to the middle of these huge arenas. And it was this little piano that didn't even have all 88 keys on it. I played, but we sang really great. And we did Afternoon Delight as part of the show, and everybody always dug that. And then we do this version of American Tune, a cappella version of Paul Simon's American Tune as the last tune that was kind of spellbinding. And people really reacted to it. Yeah.
You've done everything as a singer, songwriter, performer, composer, arranger, producer, all of it. You've appeared in films, commercials, comedies. You're a studio session performer. You're still writing. You're still performing. I hope you never die. But we've been talking.
Let's never die. Let's never die, Pete. Let's agree to it right now.
Well, in a weird kind of way, someone with your body of work doesn't, right? Because your music lives on forever. And so let me just ask you about the song that we're so lucky now to have as kind of the theme and the anthem to this show, which to me is so super special as part of like my rebirth and recreating the show, and along with the community, like the fact that was that final piece, and the fact that the song is so good and that people like it so much that it never gets old. We've heard that, you and I both, from a lot of folks who listen to the podcast. Like, where does this song come from? And it drops today because this is posting on the 1st. So tell us a little bit about how you came up with it, the lyrics. It really is an amazing anthem, and I edit the podcast every night, so I throw it in there every night, and I just
oh man,
love
you're
it.
the best for doing that. And that, it's. Oh, did you hear? Just when I was about to say what I was going to say, big clap of thunder out there.
I didn't hear it.
Has nothing to do with what I was going to say, except for the fact that you're in awe. You're as in awe of the things that you're so much smaller than, right? I mean, we're responsible. We know what it is that we do, right? And we hope we're coming from a real place when we do it. That's really all we can mind, right? That's the only thing you can say, oh, I think I can do this thing because they want to hear this, but that's going to backfire. And if it doesn't work, or if it does work, then it's like, oh shit, I'm a fraud because it did work, or they really like it, whatever it is. But it wasn't coming from the heart, right? And man, the Meredith, my wife, and I were talking, and she said, why don't you write a really good rally song, like a rally song, because she knows I'm very politically passionate. Boy, that Dave Daly you had on today.
Yeah.
You had both of my cousins on. You know, my mother's a Daly. And my daddy's a Carroll. Yeah. Yeah,
Aaron Carroll and David Daly on yesterday's show.
Dave funny. Daly, man, look, everybody listen to that, because that, basically what he was saying was, hey, we don't have a whole lot of time to figure this shit out. My comment right now is the time for astonishment is over. We got to quit sharing this wonderful mutual astonishment that makes us feel like we're all are human because we recognize horrible, shitty things that are happening. No, they're happening, and we have to mobilize, And so I kind of just wrote this thing, stand up. It just kind of came to me. I didn't think much about that. And I thought, no, all I know is that this feels like it's coming from here, man. And I spent time on the lyrics because I think that's the main thing for songwriters to do. And that's the thing that, is the work of it. And, you can pull out your hair sometime, but I knew what it was I wanted to say, and I didn't, but it wasn't something that I wanted to be conveyed any certain way. It was just, this is what we need to do. We need to stand up. However we stand up, right? However you stand up. If you stand up and go to the poll, if you stand up and go bring the Pampers to the distribution center twice a week, you got to get out. You got to get out there and do this thing. Screw the astonishment with what's happening out there that we can't do anything about. We can do lots about it, and that's really what the song was coming from. And so I just kind of I recorded it really fast. I spent a good amount of time mixing it to sound good, and I got it mastered by a fellow named Mike Mansour, but. Every instrument that I played on that record was just kind of, this is how I'm hearing this. And it kind of came from a very real place. And I just kind of sent it to you because, hey, this is inspired by what I've been fueled by with the knowledge and opinions, not so much the opinions, but just, hey, honest to goodness, sharing what it is that these folks are aware of. And this is what it is. And I wrote it from a real place and performed it from a real place. And then when I sent it to you, it was like, hey, this is kind of inspired by the group. And at that point we were, getting on the Zoom hangs and stuff. And I've got to, say, hey, Phil, hey, Pete, hey, Peter, hey, Karen Madison, hey, Therese.
What is? Yeah, let me.
Ty. Hey, Bill B. What's happening? Everybody.
Isn't it the greatest? It's like
it's the greatest. It's
really
the greatest.
Is just weird.
I hope I can see it. I need to see some of these guys while I'm in town this week.
Yeah, how many people have you actually met in person? You've met some people?
Well, Phil Round, who he hooked up with. Hey, do you know this Gardner?
Who?
There's someone else that got in touch, and I wrote a big long piece of all these things for some book that he's writing. I thought, I wonder if Pete told him to get in touch. Okay.
I think so.
No, Phil Round came by, and his friend,
talented musician, part of
our
clique.
And then Pete Co's supposed to send me some stuff so I can have some fun putting some extra music to some stuff. We're going to do that too.
I can't wait to for all of us to get together in person and for just like, I mean, I want to accommodate you to just jam and do it all. And anybody else that has any kind of musical talent that wants to join you. I mean, one of the most special moments since we started this project, this show, was with you and Vicky singing improvisationally Amazing Grace. And there's been a lot of great moments like that you've provided for us. And it has just been, I mean, I could talk to you for 3 more hours. I'm getting anxious because I got to turn this around and get it up because I want to put this up for July 1st.
The music should be what it makes people feel and what it inspires people to do, you know? And there's other songs. There's a song I wrote way back in 2007 called Paint That Dollar, which was after, you know, in the wake of the wars and everything, you know? It's like, that's two good things happened today. We found a shady spot to park in the Joe Biden service center stop off of 95. And I was thinking, well, Bill Cosby is not going to be waking up to Striped Sunshine. And that's, you know, kind of weird. But Donald Rumsfeld won't be waking up at all. So
I know. I'm trying to figure out how to talk about that. It's
but like, man, you know, we could put together a show that would be like part rally, part lecture, part seminar, part. I mean, seriously, you know, when you think about the folks who are involved, you know, and all it takes is basically, you know, making a movement cogent. Yeah, and you know, we shouldn't lose sight of that because I think it's something we could do.
We'll keep talking about it.
A lot of people need to do it. I know
that's
that.
That's damn sure. And we'll keep talking, period. John Carroll, where should people pre-order, get this song and any of your work? Is the best place the
thanks,
website?
Pete. Thanks. Yeah, well, it's going to be available tomorrow on all the platforms.
That'd be today because we're posting this on the first.
Right now. Yep. And the cool thing about being on all the platforms and what really is the key to everything, and I just would really like to just get as many people who, you know, it's going to move you and hopefully make you dance too, you know. And Pete Townsend said, you know, rock and roll doesn't solve your problems. It just enables you to dance all over them for a while, you know. But if you dance to whatever your involvement is in the community, that's cool too. But share it with somebody, you know, that's the key. If you like it, share it with somebody. That's all I ask. But it's everywhere, on my website, johncarroll.org. Google Play, Apple, Spotify. If you're on Spotify, put it on a playlist. I've got a playlist. Oh, we have the stand-up playlist as well.
Right.
Yeah. Post that on this on the release of this. Yeah, because folks can. That's a good playlist of different folks. But you can find it. And thanks so much for the shout and so much fun to hang out and talk with you for this.
Yeah,
fall.
It's great to get to know you better. You and I have talked a lot of times off the air, and I have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for you as a man, and I've learned a lot from you. And just having you in this community has been, you know, so valuable. And I was like, man, I just thought of this today. I was like, I've been wanting to, you know, talk to you on the record. I've had so many great conversations with you, and you're always so thoughtful when we all hang out. It's like I want to just get you. Corner you, and that's what we did tonight, and it was a lot of fun to hear about your life.
Thanks a big fat million, Pete.
We'll talk again soon, buddy. Congratulations, and thank you so much.
All right.
All right, there he goes, John Carroll. He reminds me of so many people all in one great person, and a lot of the great qualities of a lot of men that I've known in my life, and such a thoughtful guy and talented and original artist. So happy to have him in our community. And this song, you can go get it. Also, I'm going to put all the links to all things John Carroll in the show notes today, and I'll try to just do it every day because, you know, he's given us this song, and the least I can do is give him any kind of attention for his great career and his great music. So excited. All right, that is it. Jill Filipovic, John Carroll. Wow, what a show. Thank you so much for listening. Let me know what you thought. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. I love to read your emails. Send me your vitamin N pictures. I hope to see you tonight at our hangout. That's 8 p.m. And now it's time to put this to bed. I'll see you on the Discord platform 24/7 if you're a stand-up community member. If not, go sign up right now for a paid subscription. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. I love you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Take it away, John Carroll.
Tyrants taunt you and the sirens tease you. Better stand up, stand up. Let the brave meet the challenge, let the weak flee. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you gotta stand up, stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up, that's right. You got to rise up, you got to stand up, you got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence, even if it ain't a very friendly audience. Well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense, and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up and show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.